Howdy again everyone, and it's nice today to see a fairly important APS-C Sigma lens make its way onto Canon RF mount, their 10 to 18mm f2.8 DC-DN art. It's an ultra-wide zoom lens with a bright maximum aperture, and it only offers a smaller APS-C image circle, not full frame. Its price in the UK will be £649, so a little on the expensive side, but then again, there's no other lens like this on Canon RF at the moment. The closest equivalent is Canon's own RFS 10 to 18mm lens, but with a maximum aperture of only f4.5 to 6.3, it's way darker, only capturing less than half the amount of light as the Sigma at its widest angle, and less than a quarter when you're zoomed in. So the Sigma lens offers a major advantage, even if it costs quite a bit more. I'd like to thank Sigma UK for loaning me this lens for a week for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review, and it won't be a full review. I'll just be testing to see how well it works on a Canon EOS R7 camera, including its electronics and its sharpness on a 32 megapixel sensor. If you want to see a full review covering everything else about the optics of this lens, there will be a link in the description below to my review of the Sony version of it. Some of the sample pictures you'll see in this video are from that Sony review, but all the test pictures obviously are from my Canon EOS R7. When it comes to build quality, everything's on a par with the Sony version of the lens here, except of course for the larger mount. The lens is small and plastic, lightweight, but feels high quality in your hand. It only weighs 260 grams or so, making it useful for video making with electronic gimbals. Sigma advertised the lens as being dust and splash resistant, and there is indeed a weather sealing gasket around the metallic rear mount. Near that comes the lens's plastic focus ring, which turns smoothly and responds very well with the lens's motor to being turned. The lens's autofocus motor works silently, accurately, and almost instantaneously. It had no trouble focus tracking on my Canon EOS R7 camera either. Nice. The lens comes with a new plastic and rubber hood from Sigma that functions a little differently from normal. It clips into place rather than turning. It's slightly awkward to get used to that at first, but once you get the hang of it, it works just as securely as a twisting hood, and apparently the new design means it can be a little smaller and it can still be reverse mounted. Oh, and very useful is the lens's 67mm filter thread, vital for landscape photography. As usual on an ultra-wide lens though, use a slim filter. I use Marumi Fit and Slim polarizing filters, which are very high quality and slim enough not to introduce extra vignetting to your image. My copy of the lens did not come with a carry case, and it does not feature image stabilization. Apart from that though, the lens's build quality is excellent, and its small, lightweight nature makes it especially handy. I remember the days when an f2.8 ultra-wide angle lens for APS-C cameras looked like this, only 10 years ago now. How times have changed for the better. Okay, image quality. Let's see what the very demanding sensor of my R7 makes of this. In-camera corrections are turned on for this test. At 10mm and f2.8 in the middle of the image, we see excellent sharpness. Contrast is just good. That sharpness continues across most of the image frame, but the very corners are noticeably soft, as you can see. f4 sees a tiny improvement, and f5.6 now looks fairly sharp. Stop down to f8 though, and the effects of diffraction are already softening the image a little, and at f11 we get unavoidable diffraction softness. That's just a result of shooting on such a very high resolution camera though. So the sweet spot here is f5.6, although the lens is still usable at brighter apertures. Let's zoom in to 18mm now. At f2.8 the lens is quite sharp here, and contrast just average. Again, that sharpness continues across most of the image frame, but the very corners are noticeably soft, as you can see. This time, stopping down to f4 doesn't really see any improvement in those corners, although the middle is now looking very sharp, with great contrast, and that's the same at f5.6. Back in the corners at f5.6, we see just a small improvement in sharpness, but stop down to f8 for very decent sharpness to emerge there. However, once again, stop down as far as f11 and the whole image gets soft again, because of, well, you know. Overall, the very high-resolution 32-megapixel sensor of the Canon EOS R7 is clearly a tough playing field for the Sigma lens, but it still manages to keep its head above the water. It's always sharp in the middle of your images, corners are softer at brighter apertures, but sharpen up when you stop down the aperture to f5.6 or f8. In case you are wondering, when compared to the Canon 10 to 18mm RF lens at the same apertures, the Canon lens seems to be just a little sharper in its image corners, but the difference is really only small, and at least on the Sigma lens you can actually shoot at f2.8 in the first place, something the Canon lens can only dream of. And if you're shooting on a 24-megapixel camera, you really won't see any difference at all. Everything else about the Sigma lens, distortion, vignetting, flaring, chroma, sunstars, well, I had a look and they're all the same as the Sony version of the lens, as you would expect. So if you want even more information, go check out that review. There's a link in the description below. Overall, this Sigma lens is on the pricey side, but it also offers decent enough value for money. It's small, easy to use, has a bright aperture, excellent autofocus, handy ultra-wide zoom range, and decent enough image quality. Again, while it's just good enough on a 32-megapixel sensor, if you're shooting on a 24-megapixel camera, you'd be very impressed. So it certainly still comes recommended on Canon RF, and it's a welcome addition to that system's APS-C lens pool.